Hello and welcome to another Miniature Realms video, and here today for a painting tutorial of the new Epic Battles American Civil War Zouaves from Warlord Games. I've prepped these models using the same method as I did in the Confederate painting tutorial, so you may want to check that out. I'll put a link in the notes below, but it's a black prime, then a grey zenithal, and then a dry brush of white. And this is quite important to the process in the way that I paint these, because I'm using contrast paints as almost as glazes. So I start here with Blood Angels red. It's contrast paint, and I'm going to be using that mostly on the trousers and the hats. So this is where the joy of the contrast paint comes in over the zenithal highlight. So what you're getting is a bit of natural highlighting. You're basically pre-highlighting using the zenithal and the dry brush. So when the paint dries, you can see more than just a plain red there. You've got your shade, you've got your darker areas, and you've got your lighter areas as well that come through. I will highlight after this as well, but you can leave them just at this level and you get much more than you would do just from a flat paint. I sped this up for you, and I will do that for quite a lot of the part sections of this video to cut it down. I think it took me about an hour in total to paint these 5 men. So there we are, all finished. You can just about see the highlights built in there. And then on to the hats. So hats, they're more headscarves on these. I find painting with contrast quite easy. It flows very well. I find I'm able to do it quite quickly. Obviously this is sped up a little bit, but it's still a fairly quick and easy process. Sorry for the focus on the camera. Sometimes it's when I move around it does go out of focus slightly, especially when it's sped up. It shows up a little bit more. So there we are with the headscarves done. Now on to the next colour. Again, contrast is Ultramarines Blue, which I'll be using for the jackets. I should have said that I'm painting these as the Coppens Battalion Confederate Regiment. So the trick here is to not be too thin with it, because you lose some of that sort of natural shadow you get when the contrast paint goes into the crevices and things, but not too heavy either, because then you will obliterate the natural highlights that are put there with the pre-shade, the pre-highlight, sorry, and the dry brushing. So it's all part of that zenithal effect. You could get away without doing the zenithal effect, absolutely. You could go over white on this. I'd probably go over a grey, but I do find that it's a fairly simple process. And you do get a lot from it. And if you don't have an airbrush, that was obviously done with an airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, you can get away with rattle can grey and then still do a white dry brush, and you'll still help aid you with this kind of effect. And there we are with the sort of the main colours down there. This is another contrast paint, Talisar Blue. They all have just a tiny bit showing, but they do have, I don't know what you call it, a sash or a cummerbund. And that's what I'm going to paint in now. So it doesn't take too long here to go along. There's only a tiny little bit showing on the fronts and a very thin line showing on the back. Okay, that stage done, and now we're on to contrast Black Templar. And I used this a couple of times during the process. Right here, I'm struggling to take the lid off, I think, at this stage. Probably should have sped this bit up as well, but I'm just going to go in and paint some bits. So there's a little bit below the trouser. And then they have like a white kind of sock area, so you Civil War buffs that know what these parts are called, please do leave in the comments. And then the boots are black underneath as well, so I do leave a little bit of the grey showing through, which I'll come along and touch up with white later. It's very little bit, very small parts of the boot showing, so it's quite easy to do. It doesn't really matter what goes on the base because you're going to be painting that over afterwards, so you can be quite sort of happy and loose with this part. Okay, here we are, another stage done. So now I've got some Citadel Grace here. Any grey paint will do here. And what I'm doing here is kind of going back and just sort of touching up some little areas so that the contrast paint works nicely on them. Primarily the cross belt, or not cross belt, there's only one belt, the belt across the chest, and just touching up on the bags and the packs and the water bottles and all those things, just so that when I do add contrast paint that I'm getting the full effect of the natural highlighting. So just adding a little bit to the edges just to make them pop a little more, and it's really worth it, because otherwise when you apply the contrast paint, you get a much flatter colour. See, I'm just touching on the hands and things there as well, where the previous coats have maybe just gone over slightly. So it's well worth going back and doing this quick touch-up stage, and I'm being quite loose with it again. Contrast paint, because it's very liquid, it kind of runs into the gaps and things and hides a lot of mistakes, a bit like washes do. Here we go, so on to the next stage. I've got, I'm going to use two colours here, so I've got Gore Grunter Fur and I've got Agaras Dunes. They're both contrast paints, and I'm going to paint these on the sort of water bottles and on the bags and things. So the few images I found, they looked brown or sort of tan colour. They're Confederates anyway, so I get the idea that they may have slightly mismatched equipment, and for a lot of campaigns it wasn't that too many years before, because the Confederates didn't get to resupply their uniforms from stores the same as the Union Army would. They would be losing these wonderful Zouave uniforms anyway. I think one of the battles that I'm focusing on at the moment for a game I'm planning in Antietam, your very famous, a lot of your very famous Zouave regiments are completely lost their Zouave uniforms by that stage, which is quite a shame. I don't even know whether Copland's Brigade will have still had the uniforms. Anyway, on to the next stage, which is Dark Oath Flesh. So that goes straight over the whites of their faces and their hands. That was another reason I wanted to go back over with the grey serum and just make sure that anywhere where I've accidentally painted over a part of the hand that it was light enough to get the full effect of the contrast paint. You'll see later I do go back and add further highlights, but you could easily stop at just after painting the contrast paints, and this kind of the grayscale, as I keep saying, the grayscale pre-highlighted preparation beforehand just gives you a shade and a highlight, maybe even a bit of a mid-tone as well. So next thing, back to Black Templar again, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to paint in the cross, race the belt across the chest, the straps of the guns. Unlike the plastic models in this range, they've got a lot less webbing, which was a joy not to have to paint, even at this scale. There we are. So next stage is a non-contrast paint. It's a shade. It's Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss, and I use this on the weapons over this pre-highlight, this dry brush over the top of the grey and the black. Now, I never used this before I saw the tutorial for the plastics that was in War Games Illustrated. A really good tutorial on how to paint the plastic sprue. I used a lot of techniques that I already use, which are the ones I'm using now, which is I do use a lot of contrast paints on tabletop troops, especially at this kind of scale, whereas maybe at 28mm I don't paint the whole model in this kind of colours. It works perfectly for this scale. And then I tend to highlight afterwards. Don't just use contrast on its own. But the tutorial was fantastic, and they recommended using this paint, and I thought, well, it looks good, I'll give it a go, and I've used it all throughout this project. Okay, so back to the grey sear again, and just doing a tiny little bit of touch up as I did before, and I'm just going to go in and touch up on the hair and the moustaches and beards, so that when I do go, I want to add some colour a little bit later, they're prepared. At this scale, it's very, very hard to get the flesh wash on without going everywhere else. And then I'm just putting in some contrast colours on the moustaches and beards, and I used Yandan yellow there. I used some wild wood as well, which is contrast paint. So we're getting to a stage now where nearly everything's painted. So this is where I start the highlight stage, really. You could use them as it is now, but this is where I start to add some highlights, and I've gone for a Citadel McCloud blue, mainly because it was pretty much the right colour straight out of a pot. I'm just using it to add some slight highlights to the jackets. Being fairly rough with it at this scale, and of course it's only tabletop, and the idea of there'll be thousands of these on the table once they're all painted. There we are. So for the red, so for the trousers and the headscarves, or whatever they're properly called, was Evil Sun Scarlet, another Citadel colour. Don't use a lot of Citadel paints, but they, not generally, apart from contrast and washes and things of their standard ranges. Sorry, I don't use a lot of their standard ranges, but those colours just seem to be perfect for what was needed here. And they do very good reds. The range is very good for their reds. So again, being fairly quick and easy here. Trousers have got nice kind of folds in them, so it's easier to sort of draw lines across where the folds are, so you're picking out the highlights quite easily, and it really makes the models pop. You really don't have to do this stage though with these models. There's so many of them on the table. Just stopping at the contrast still gives you sufficient sort of highlight and shade. This just really makes them stand out. And as I'm not doing too many Zouave regiments, I thought it would be nice to spend a little bit of extra time doing that. The time I saved not doing all the webbing on the standard plastics, it probably still took me less time to do these, even with the extra highlights and things there. Yeah, just the odd little line on the headscarves as well, just to make them pop a little bit. And there we are. So we really are getting somewhere now. So a bit of white. I mentioned earlier that below the knee you've got it split into sort of three. You've got the black at the bottom of the trousers, and then you've got this white sort of sock area, and then you've got your boots. So I'm just going to go in and just add a little bit of white to that sock area to make it stand out. It's grey at the moment anyway, and quite a light grey, so it still looks about right, but this just really sort of tidies it up and makes it show up a little bit more. Something I've done on these, which I didn't do on the standard plastic rank and file, was to go back into the faces and just add a slight highlight before glazing them back down again. I just found them, they're slightly dark. The heads are slightly larger, maybe a little bit more detail on them. I did this with some of the commanders and things, but I definitely didn't do it with a standard rank and file. But I just found they looked a bit dark, so I'm just using a Vallejo Noctura Fairy Flesh and picking out the foreheads, cheeks, nose, etc., chin, where there isn't a beard. And it looks a little bit bright to start with. But then I'll come in with Darko Flesh again, the contrast, watered down 50-50, and then just glaze that over the top just to tie it back down. It just gives you the right balance, I feel. And here I am with that, the Darko Flesh again. So I'm just going to take some of that on a palette, just a tiny little amount, add some water, 50-50, and then just plop it back over the faces again, and it just gives you a nice sort of medium tone as opposed to something that was slightly dark before or too bright with the stark highlights. So we really starting to come together now. So we now have the belt buckles. So I'm using Scale 75 Necro Gold. Probably one of my all-time favourite paints. Just a beautiful desaturated gold, but it's a very bold colour at the same time. Works quite well for brasses and things like that. Very good coverage whether it's through the airbrush or with the hairy brush. Yeah, definitely one of my go-to paints. So if you're looking to pick up a gold paint, I can't recommend Summer Scale 75's metallics enough, actually. It's very basic, they're pretty much just little dots, but little things like that really start to make the images come together. Okay, so another Scale 75 paint, and it's it's called Black Metal. Again, this is probably my most used metal on the silver scale, shall we say. So I'm just going in there now and picking out the barrels, realising that a couple of them are still bent. This is a metal miniature. Realising that some of them are still bent, but I'll sort that out later. Just picking out the barrels in between the barrel bands there. And I'll flip them over and just sort of touch around the backs, and then I'll do lower down the stock where where your working parts and things are, but just little marks just to indicate it really. At this scale, it doesn't matter if you're slightly off here and there. It is very much a Mass Effect thing, but having enough highlight in there to make them pop as well at the same time can really give a more of an impressive effect. So looking pretty good there. You could leave that again at this stage. So I'm going to use some Game Air Silver though, just to add a further highlight to the barrels. In some ways it could be just going too far at this stage, but once I think of an idea, sometimes I just have to do it. But as you see, this isn't sped up here at all, and you can see how bright this is. It just really makes it pop, and I'm sure the argument will be, well, that metal wouldn't be that bright at all. Absolutely it wouldn't be, but sometimes a little bit of artistic light as miniature painting goes a long way. And again, it just adds more contrast. The different layers of the highlights there really makes it stand out. So here we are then. So one of the final stages is these guys have lots of trim. Now I looked at a couple of different images. The most common I found was yellow trim for the Coppins Battalion. I did find one image that came up with a search that was red. This is internet searches. So I went with yellow. I could be wrong. I've talked about this on a vlog that I did, and I've not had any comments telling me I'm wrong yet, but I'm sure it will happen after I finish. Now I finished painting the second stand. I probably will only have 2 stands of these, so it's not the end of the world if I did need to change this trim to red. Now it's quite hard to pick out the trim on the miniature. It is there. It's quite hard to get to in places. the details a bit hidden in places as well. So what I'm trying to do is just pick out an impression of it. I think this lot are actually back rank as well, so they'll be so close to the rank in front that you really won't be able to see it. So it's just giving you a little bit of an indication, a feeling that trim's there. And it's amazing what adding another colour does to those jackets. So there's two jackets. I think there's like an over jacket, over an inner jacket, and they both have some kind of filigree or piping around it. Just adding a little bit of yellow to represent some of it, it really seems to just finish these off and really make them stand out. And then on the cuffs of the jackets, they have a inverted V on the sort of the top part of the cuff. I don't know how you describe it, but I'm just adding that in where they're visible, or little parts of it here and there. And again, it's just another little yellow mark here or there. It just makes them makes the uniform looks a bit more flash. And then the main miniatures are done, so I'm using some Scale 75 Petroleum Grey. I use this on nearly all my bases. It's kind of a mix between a brown and a grey, a dull grey, almost a charcoal grey maybe. If you think back to old GW colours, a Chandon Granite, that kind of colour. So I'm just painting it in between their feet while they're not stuck down, because it makes it a lot easier. And so I paint there, and then I'll stick them onto the base and around on the base as well. So I use this as just kind of my undercoat really for the basing effects and things that I use afterwards. So that's that done now. So that's the major work done on that. And the next stages will be to stick it to the base, make sure that the same stages are done on the other 3 stands that make up the base. And then I can start adding the effects. So we end up with something that's close to the other stand I've done, the command stand there. Okay, so there we are, all stuck on the base. The Chandon Granite, sorry, that's the old paint I mentioned, the Petroleum Grey from Scale 75, all over the base. And then we're on to the next few stages. So I'm just showing you again there. So the Petroleum Grey was what was actually on there. So now I use lots of effects. So this is Vallejo Earth Texture. This stuff's great. It's about £12 a pop in the UK, but you get so much more than you do from the sort of GW. It's textured paint essentially, and this is Dark Earth, which is my most used one. They do have lots of different shades. Sort of a desert one, a sandy one. They have a lighter or more orangey earth. But all I do really is I'm covering the whole of the base in this instant, because I want to level off where the metal base for the actual miniature is and where the plastic base is. So I don't want there to be a lump. On models where you don't see that, I don't always do a thick full cover. It often leaves some patches, because it's all about building of textures and building texture through different colour that will give you the most effect. It doesn't have to be thick with texture all over and dry brush. That's very old school. So it's about creating an appropriate kind of effect of texture. But this is needed here a little bit just to cover that edge, so I am covering it all. I don't worry too much about in between them. I go in a little way with the brush, but you can't see too much in the middle. I'm not too worried about that. I found if you fill it in beforehand and then stick them on, every time I always find that it goes a few mils over where I need, and then they don't sit flush to the base and it becomes faffy. So I gave up with that and just stuck them on the base. It is dark already, that's why I pre-painted them with the Petroleum Grey, and then just go around with this. And there we are, all done. It will take an hour or two to dry. And then after it's dry, you can come in with Agrax Shade, which is a favourite for many hobbyists. Liquid Talent, I've heard it called. I've had all sorts of things. I love this stuff. It's very good. I don't use it on every miniature. I tend to use it on bases more than anything else. But it does do a great job of just toning down and tying in things like it is here with this brown, which is probably a little bit too light in colour, and wasn't showing off enough of its texture. There we are. So that again would have taken an hour or two to dry, and then I'm going to put some pigment on. This is Vallejo Pigments Light Sienna. It's kind of, I find it quite important here. I don't like the kind of just wash over sand look. I prefer to, as I talked about a little bit earlier, have textures and things, and this is incredibly simple. I'm just brushing this in. I'm not going to fix it. It will stay on the miniature because it will go in between the gaps enough, and just drying out that earth there, I think, just adds a level of realism that's away from that kind of very typical sand brown paint wash look. And there we go. I think that looks quite good as it is. You just need to pick up the light and stuff, especially doing patches. And then Vallejo Thick Mud. This is slightly different to the earth texture. This stuff is designed, I think when it dries, it's a little bit transparent. It's more of an effect rather than an actual kind of a base. And I've just put some splodges of this on. Again, little things like that. Just adds more interest to the eye, which goes beyond just that kind of basic sort of flock or sand and one colour and a bit of a wash and a tiny bit of a dry brush. I haven't dry brushed a base for years. Tend to prefer to use effects like this. I find it quicker and I prefer the results. That dries relatively quickly, and then it's time to put some tufts on. I don't like flock. It can look messy, especially on bases like this at this scale. So I'm using some 2mm tufts from War Paint Figures. I'm using some winter ones and some summer ones. Bit of a mixture, really. I'm not really worried about what they're called. I'm sorry the camera went blurry here and I didn't really realise it a few times, but we'll cut them in half so that the straight edge matches along the edge of the base. So it's nice and neat. I'll just place a few around the edge. So it's a mix of seasons, but as I said, I'm not really interested in what they're named. It's about having a breakup of colour and different colour grasses and things, which means that they will stand, they'll generally look okay on multiple different playing surfaces. So you have a lot of grass, you've got some grass on there. If you have a lot of dust and mud, you've got that on the base and the lighter dusty grass and things as well. So you find that they blend in with different gaming tables and mats better that way. And then the final stage, which I always do for all my miniatures, I very rarely paint anything other than black on the rims, and that's what I'm doing here to finish them off. There we just speed that up slightly here because it's not the most interesting thing to watch is someone paint black rim on a base. And there we are. That's the finished stand. And I think it took me just over an hour, and that's with leaning around the camera slightly, so I could have probably knocked off a few minutes or so. I found them a little bit quicker than the plastic ones I mentioned before. I think the overall effect is pretty good. I like using the pre-highlights, the black, the zenithal grey, and the dry brush of white beforehand, because it really helps those contrast colours pick. And they're the two stands that I've done of the Coppins Battalion. That's based on the size of game I'm using. That's maybe all I'll do with that particular regiment. You see a couple of pictures there on my gaming table, so you can see how they look there. But I'm pretty happy with them. They come out pretty well. It's very much a tabletop level finish on them. So I don't think there's anything there that any painter couldn't do. But you definitely don't have to do all of the stages that I did there at all. So anyway, thanks for watching the video. Please do like, share and subscribe and all that stuff. If you found this new, there's lots of epic battles, American Civil War stuff on the channel, a vlog, a couple of other painting tutorials. One of them shows the original paint job that I did on the Confederates, which shows you how to do the zenithal highlight, the airbrush itself. So if you'd like to watch that to understand how I got to the stage at the beginning, please do. But thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you soon.